Good morning. Welcome, everyone.
Good morning.
We will
Good
give everyone
morning.
a few minutes to get on the webinar here, but we do have a few
in some
housekeeping items we'll go through once we get everybody on the bridge.
Actually, it's good afternoon.
Yeah, good
for us.
afternoon to some of our folks in the UK.
Yeah, that's why I
And
think
elsewhere.
I say good day.
Good
Good
day.
day, yeah. All right, so while we just wait for everybody to get on the conference bridge here, just going to go over a couple of housekeeping items. Again, we're very excited to have Shawn Gray here joining us for a great discussion today, all about technology adoption and construction. And just a reminder for everybody on the webinar as well, we are recording today's session. So if you have to hop off or you have a colleague that would like to watch the recording, that will be available on our website, niali.com/events. We'll also post these videos to our YouTube channel as well. And throughout today's webinar, we highly encourage you to ask questions in the chat. We're going to hold time at the end for a Q&A, and if we get any really good questions as well, we may actually jump in and handle those as they come up in the webinar as well. We also have the registration link up for our April webinar series. This is going to be featuring Rich Seiler from Unified Works. If you haven't met Rich before, he's quite a personality, so this should be a really fun session. It's going to dive all the topic on this is team building. So how to build your high performance team in construction. We're going to be talking about the last planner system. It should be a really engaging session with Rich, and I've posted the details for this webinar in the chat. It's also on our website. That's going to be happening April 24th, so we highly encourage you to tune in for that session. On the topic of events as well, we have a very busy roster this spring. So if you are planning to attend any of these shows yourself, we highly encourage you to come meet with our team. In particular, I want to draw attention to the Last Planner System Conference. This is the first time that the Lean Construction Blogs Conference is going to be happening in person. It's available as a hybrid event too. You can join remotely, but this is happening down in San Francisco in several weeks. And if you're in that area, we highly encourage you to come check out this event. We're also going to be hosting our own after hours event in conjunction with this as well. So if you're in the area, definitely come check this out. And again, on our events page, you can find all of the different events that we're going to be at over the next little while. And so that's all for my intro spiel. I'd like to pass it over to Alan, who's going to be interviewing our guest speaker, Shawn Gray, today. He's a fellow Calgarian, just like us. And I'd like to welcome Shawn to our webinar. Thanks for joining us, Shawn.
Thanks for having me. Thank you.
Yeah, right on, Laura. Thank you. So why don't we get started? First of all, thank you, Shawn, for taking the time to sit and have a chat with us. Why don't we start with just a little bit about you, how you got into sort of the construction space and what you're doing now, just to give people a little bit of an idea about Shawn.
Sure, thanks. And where do we begin? Do we go 20 years back? What do we do here? But you know, I'm a professional engineer, structural engineer. I've been in the industry for almost 2 decades. You know, getting into it, I think when we chatted previous, it's like, yeah, this probably started when, you know, playing Legos, like more than just a hobby, pastime back in childhood days. But been very purpose driven. The getting into this industry, especially coming from Western Canada, where oil and gas is kind of was the traditional pinnacle of industry where you get into. You know, I've always had a desire to do something a little more hands-on, a little more direct impact to people in society on every single day. I started my career in construction engineering, construction design, around bridges, transportation, and I was hooked on the first day that we're on the job site, and you know, you can see immediately the people working hard and the people that are benefiting from those assets. Also, you know, back then, seen today too, the struggles and challenges of those hardworking staff every single day. The fires out there fighting every single day, the communication challenges and otherwise. So I've been on a 2-decade journey of exploring new technologies, opportunities to improve productivity and profitability of those projects, addressing issues that resonate with those stakeholders. Spent a decade with the largest, the number one engineering construction management firm globally. Worked on $5 billion worth of construction projects, as well as held the role of technology leader for the construction management practice in that company. Through that time, spearheaded over a dozen AI and data-driven initiatives, really designed around helping firms or helping those folks do more work with less resources. Those technologies that we developed or we partnered with external stakeholders. We've scaled those out to $25 billion in construction. Along with that experience came not so much on the what technology works or doesn't work, but more so on the nuances that are required to get people to actually adopt these things and to actually yield results from those technologies. And that's kind of been the secret sauce, the secret recipe. So having that I guess massive plate of opportunity for me to be experimenting with on the adoption side of things has equipped me with some really interesting insights. And in the last 2 years, I've kind of taken those insights to the market as an independent consultant, where I've been focusing more on the mid-market firms, 500 million and less type of groups. They're a lot more leaner businesses, and they have a lot more constraints and pressures. So helping them identify and adopt these new technologies with a lot less risk, time, and cost involved, and get them some results a little quicker. That's a lot what I've been up to lately, Alan.
Yeah, that sounds really good, and I think we'll probably hear a few of your stories, case studies, so to speak. I think that'll be of interest to our viewers for sure. So let's start with something that, 4 or 5 years ago, you'd go to a conference or you'd read in blogs that people would be moaning the fact that the construction industry was under, like sort of, down near hunters and trappers as far as technology adoption. It's 2025, and why don't you just tell us like state of the union, both North America and globally or in regions, just what you're seeing in terms of adoption, because I know you do a lot of research in that area.
Yeah, sure. And that the statement you made is fairly accurate in terms of when you look at every single sector, right down to fur trapping and hunting, as you mentioned. Yeah, this industry does have a bad rap on on being the lower adopters, but I think we challenge that stigma when we look at the construction industry, an industry that predates, BC times.
True.
Truly. Really hasn't fundamentally made any crazy changes to processes or execution since about World War II. So over 50 years ago, or almost 70 years ago now. What we look at is in the last 20 years, when we benchmark the 2000s is when construction industry really started embracing new technologies. In the last 20 years, there's been over $30 billion of investment made in new technologies.
Wow.
Almost 3/4 of industry, major GCs, mid-sized firms, specialty trades, 3/4 of industry have adopted some type of new technology. So that's something that I think a lot, especially external facing to the industry, don't see because they're not living it every single day. They just see what's in the headlines. But there's the stigma around this industry being behind. I don't quite agree. We've done a lot in a very, very short period of time, relatively speaking. And that's something that needs to be understood. So there's actually the folks that are sitting on the sidelines that have not really taken meaningful steps in technology. They are now the minority. The majority are well on their way. They have adopted some technologies. They're well on their way to scaling out certain things. Many of them considered, about 20% of the industry consider themselves digital first, whatever that means to them. But that narrative is just saying that technology in the industry now is a norm. We're finding cases of people myth busting every single day on that front. When you said, well, what does technology adoption mean? When we look at what these groups have done in that 20 years, just some baselining and benchmarking, about 40% of the industry have adopted some type of solutions that help them with 3D design. So taking rather than the 2D way of planning and designing. So 3D modeling is mainstream. Cloud-based project management systems and ERPs are fairly mainstream, and dashboards and analytics. So those 3D designs, cloud-based systems and analytics, over 40% of industry have embraced one or many of those. Where we've seen a shift in the last 10 years have been a growing trend in more field-enabled types of technologies, helping the field operators perform their jobs a little more efficiently. And we've seen a significant uptick, and about 30% of industry have adopted technologies around like augmented reality, mixed reality in the field, being able to see designs in the in the real world, either through mobile devices or otherwise. Those technologies that are enabling more prefabricated, modularized type of construction elements, and then the complementary items around like robotics, drones, UAVs. So when we look at what are people doing at scale, the 3D designs, cloud analytics, the increasing trend around augmented reality, prefabrication, enabled technologies, and robotics. Those are where we're seeing the most traction in the wide world of what could people be doing with technologies. An interesting anecdote, I was dealing with a major residential development engineer, and our engagement, they mentioned they didn't see much alignment in our little engagement because they figured themselves were highly digitized. They said they were 90% digitized, and I asked them, like, what does that even mean to
no
you?
kidding.
And they listed all these different softwares and things they're doing, and I just asked those folks, I said, well, okay, you've got lots of technologies that you're dealing with. I'm anticipating, what results you've spent a lot of money on those. Has that significantly enhanced your business processes and your people's output? Have you achieved significant results from there? And that fairly well-established major company leader did take a pause and kind of reflected, and I think that helped that person redefine, what does technology adoption mean? Does it mean more, or does it mean find the few that produce the results?
Yeah, you're going in an interesting direction. I could just hear this person. Well, everybody's got an iPad, and so that's your 90%. Maybe I have no idea, but you're going in an interesting direction because you're pointing at, and I know this is the work you do, having customers understand the value and then figure out what the technology is to deliver value or solve a problem or become more effective or efficient. Can you just talk to a couple of examples where you've helped people, they run a pilot and it kind of, they don't see the value. Like, how do you help companies talk about, ROI for the investment and value? You started sort of going in that direction. Why don't you continue? I think it's interesting.
I'll put something on the screen here in value. So, this is so relevant to Niali as well, being a lean construction technology application where, a lot about lean is value. What is value, and how do you even define value stakeholder?
Right.
that is typically, if we talk about contributing factors to success or failure of the this one here. Sorry, I'm just sharing my screen here.
Yeah,
The success or failures of technology. A lot of it starts with the misalignment of value. And hopefully you can see this. I can't zoom in on this, or else it just zooms the text here. But this was a value mapping exercise that we completed with about $250 million construction firm. What we consistently find in terms of validating value, each stakeholder has specific needs. They have specific items that they require to do and to achieve their their mission or their job functions, their roles, meet their performance targets. Every single role, every single person has something different, completely different objectives. Some of them have overlapping objectives, but it's that human nature. It's, what's in it for me that drives a lot of, the definition of value. And when we look at areas of value, some groups, in this example, we had multiple different construction business stakeholders. They were mapping out, what's important for them as a stakeholder. What do they need or want to be doing to execute their job function more effectively? So you can see there's a number of different stakeholders. They listed out a number of different needs. There's a lot more than this. This just got boiled down to the top ones. But this is really just showing that you can kind of start seeing from the relationship diagram here that there are between like what a general superintendent needs or thinks is value, is different from the business owner. And there's a misalignment often between, what does one stakeholder need and consider value compared to another. So this is a powerful thing to understand, when we're looking at, different technology options or what's best for the groups. It's, where are we finding definitions of value that resonate with most stakeholders? Most often we find that there's a misalignment between different stakeholders and what the value is. And also we identify that there's not just stakeholder needs, but there are core underlying business needs or business constraints. And even with that, that helps define or defines areas of value as well from a business standpoint. Businesses need to meet client requirements. They need to meet workforce and productivity requirements, cash flow cost requirements, and depending on the nature of the business growth requirements. And we see that sometimes our stakeholder needs, wants, desires are not aligned with some or all of the core business objectives. And also we see that there are different constraints, and usually many constraints, preventing stakeholders or businesses from achieving those objectives. And we find that those constraints impact some or few business stakeholders. We can start seeing that there are different bottlenecks, but also different overlapping areas of value definition between the stakeholders and the business. And that's kind of fundamentally, when we're, how do you define value? Is it one of the most challenging item seems to be for the business group stakeholders, especially when they're trying to identify right pieces of technology. But there are means and methods where you can identify key overarching stakeholder needs that resonate with many stakeholders, that associate with what the business itself values most and needs, and where those kind of key connection points associate with the most amount of stakeholders. So it's an interesting way that, when we perceive what value means, and the challenges around that, typically most of the technology initiatives die on the vine immediately when, upon misalignment on value between what the stakeholder thinks they need or want to what the technology can actually provide. It's quite interesting. And when we look at key areas of value right now, when we're looking at from a North American standpoint here, where 80% of firms are experiencing resource challenges, half the firms are experiencing cash flow challenges. Emissions reductions are starting to come into play over North America, more so in Europe. And when we look where true value is being created today, meaningful needle-moving value, when we look at the resource challenges, cost challenges, and sustainability, those are the areas where, when they're looking at new initiatives, where a 1% increment improvement seems to unlock the most business gains. So when groups are looking at what is happening at the field level, the field execution operation level, preventing their resources from being fully productive, what from that productivity, where are the bottlenecks that are preventing them from being paid, and then where can they be obviously doing things more sustainability. So it is a field focus that where the groups are discovering the highest amount of business value in technology initiatives today. And then on the same side of that coin, in the last 20 years, that when we talked about the more mainstream technologies being the 3D modeling, the project management systems and the analytics, those are office-facing, leadership-facing type of back office type of support systems that often required those field operators to be taking on multiple more administrative tasks to feed those engines. That is not valuable to that field operator. And coincidentally has created a significantly more administrative time for those field operators. And when we look at the relationship between our resources being constrained on the job site, things are taking longer. We're seeing more rework and activities not going as planned. Well, when our field operators are bogged down more than ever with those administrative burdens, how can they be out in the field mentoring, supervising, planning, coordinating, and avoiding rework? Those things that are fundamentally constraining our resources, fundamentally costing our projects more. It's interesting when we look at value. The highest value use cases right now from a business impact standpoint and from a stakeholder going, yes, I love this, I want to do this, right now is around the things that are significantly freeing up time for those field stakeholders so they can divert that time to something of higher value. And that's kind of something interesting that's happened just in the last few years, especially with the advent of more readily available AI and data-driven type of solutions, is that the field operators putting their hands up and saying, we understand we have to do these tasks, but we need more time. We don't have more resources to throw at problems. We need more time, and we would love solutions that help complement our processes so we can be more effective as a people. So in the last 20 years, we've never had that alignment ever happen between the business and field, where it's the time is now the key element of alignment of significant value. So it's interesting how that alignment is now happening.
Yeah, it's an interesting topic, and we often discuss reducing the time to value for stakeholders, and the closer you get to zero, obviously, the better. So it's interesting that you say that. So like most of the larger companies, they have groups that are, dedicated to experimenting with technologies, seeking out new technologies, whether it's value driven or not. And you're dealing more with smaller companies that don't have that luxury. Like, is there a formula that you've found that, I'm thinking of our viewers and they're going, well, that's fine, but I don't have an innovation IT, person. How do you go about, introducing things and helping them make decisions? Like, is there a formula, or like how does that happen? And I guess I'm talking about awareness, pilot, and then, deployment, and maybe you have an example of a success story and here's why.
Sure, and I'll throw a couple things for you. So the big businesses, yes, most of them, especially the billion-dollar plus businesses, they have in-house innovation data teams that far eclipse the average employee size of 90% of businesses out there.
Right.
But even those big businesses, you know, they operate, most of them operate under, they have mini businesses within them, regional, geographic,
Yeah.
sector vertically. So even those groups, when you actually compartmentalize them down inside, when you open the hood and look inside, they actually struggle with very similar items as the smaller businesses. And fundamentally, that comes down to a couple, two underlying constraints, regardless of business size. There's typically, and you kind of alluded to it around the resource side of things, but it typically comes down to the fact that regardless of the business size, or 85% of businesses do not have a dedicated or adequate budget for technology and the resources to support that technology. If you do not have the budget, you do not get the results. That is clear cut. So that is when you boil things down, and you kind of, you've got maybe some culture challenges, maybe you've got some client challenges, things like, when you boil those out, it always fundamentally comes down to budget. And then all of a sudden, with that also time. So do you have the budget, and do you have the resources? Do you have the people that have the time to go and actually just help you discover it, manage and implement and adopt? So what we've kind of, in the framework that I specifically bring to the market, really is, especially for the smaller groups, the more leaner teams, they definitely do not have the capital to be creating these entire new innovations side of the teams. Well, in the last 20 years, there have been a few of us that have learned a lot, and now we're out in the market. And where these smaller teams are actually very, very good at is bringing together those fractional expertise. So a lot of these mid or smaller companies, they have fractional finance leaders, they have fractional legal teams, they have fractional marketing business development teams, and then they have fractional innovation leadership teams. These groups where they come in, they do a high value piece of specific scope, and then they go away. So that is how a lot of these smaller mid-market firms are operating. These high performance, high growth firms. That has been a common theme amongst those, and I've dealt with a number of those, and I see that case by case. Some of them that have been listed as the top most innovative, especially in the North American space, as well as some of them have been listed as the highest growing per revenue year over year. One of the consistent themes is they leverage those third-party experts to be doing a very specific function, and now some of them have identified that gap in that innovation, technology management, and technology leadership space, and they've been bringing in experts to spearhead those initiatives. And that's something different than traditional like IT department work. This is about technology innovation. So they usually start with bringing in an expert who's walked the walk before, helps them reduce the amount of time and money they waste on exploring and the trial and error approach. Cut to the chase. These people know what works, what doesn't work, what they've seen before. They can mobilize those into businesses a lot more efficiently. There is, especially around the budget side of things, big or small, it doesn't really matter, but the smaller firms, they have a lot more capital constraints. But there are a number of different levers and mechanisms that firms can take today. There are, either to manifest the budget or to recover costs. There are industry partnerships that can be formed between associations. So, for example, we represent the Prairie's PropTech Association, and they have access to public and private funds to help subsidize resources and technology in certain areas. There are a great group, Industry Sandbox for AI Computing, based in Western Canada. They're a great provide low cost servers, GPUs, things like that for technology initiatives. Depending on where you are, geographically, regionally, there are a whole new bank of different tax incentives that businesses can be taken advantage of. Claiming software as corporate business expenses, subscription costs, that's something that's typically often overlooked. There are a whole whackload of grants and subsidies available now, especially around technology adoption, construction sector, technology adoption that supports residential development and critical infrastructure development. There are interesting mechanisms where you can get third party to pay your technology bills, and that's through, you can establish joint ventures with, let's say, I wouldn't say it's a very relationship-based industry. So even though you have, fierce competitors, you're often looking at similar technologies, have similar challenges. So I'm seeing a big trend happening in the mid-market where these similar businesses are coming together to kind of adopt technology as a joint venture. So they all kind of share in those costs and kind of share in and spread the load that way has been an effective tactic. Something I've been seeing as one of the most significant items directly addressing the budgetary pressures around technology really has been mechanisms when you look at the average cost of a piece of technology. Obviously they range based on what you're doing, but typically the average cost of a piece of technology today is around $22,000 a year, ranging up to $150,000. When we look at $22,000, and when we look at why things cost so much, especially some of these emerging technologies, a lot of that boils down to the decision-making time from the buyer. The average decision-making time from the first point of discovery to actually signing the work order, purchase order or subscription for that technology. In our industry, that's 8 to 12 months. And
Wow.
so you can understand, just in our construction or engineering business, when you're waiting, there's the overhead costs, there's the sales costs, there's the resource costs that you're floating. So when we look at why technology is so expensive today, and when that there's such a most of that cost is actually around the business development, the marketing side of things, and that retaining costs of overhead to make that sale. One of the most effective ways that we've seen the small and mid-market firms reduce that upfront cost without, let's say in a mutually beneficial way is speeding that decision-making time. And there's a methodology, that my business helps employ, the proof of value approach, where it really is about helping those stakeholders, the business stakeholders, and the actual users identify value as significantly sooner, make decisions within about 12 weeks or less. The ones that have been able to make those decisions in that shortened time frame have been reducing their technology costs by up to 50%.
Oh, wow, that's huge.
And that is not saying that it's about squeezing those technology providers for unwarranted discounts. It's about these groups that are coming in with an approach mutual objective that the buyer and the seller, they both want efficient adoption. They both want value creation. And when they both come in at a mutual point of alignment in terms of what they're trying to do, have an efficient process of collaborating with each other, that 8 to 12 months usually can come down to about 3 months or less. The technology provider is seeing that, hey, they've now actually saved me the buyer has actually saved me $10,000. I will be happy to share those savings with the buyer in forms of significant discount. That has been one of the most significant opportunities that I've been seeing with those mid-market groups, the ones that have been taking a collaborative, mutually aligned approach with the technology vendor, just as they would as with a craft trade partner.
Right.
Those relationships help. There's also an interesting emerging mechanism around, if you strictly have no budget, and I was talking to a group 2 days ago, 100-year this company down in the southern U.S. Company's over 100 years old, third generation, civil construction firm, doing some really interesting technology initiatives. And the only question I asked them was, "How are you paying for this?" And it was kind of radio silence. So even that, those big legacy businesses, they some of them don't have budgets for these things. Especially with some of the interesting things happening over in the world around tariffs, a lot of cost pressures. So that's eating up the technology budgets, typical IT budgets. But there's an interesting mechanism that groups are starting to pick up on, especially if you're a general contractor. There are platform technologies that you can adopt at no cost that help you offer your trade partners access to early payment in exchange for a reduction in that vendor's bill. And that reduction on vendor's bill, especially on the projects that are being executed as in a lump sum fashion, those savings are direct bottom line savings to your business. So these groups are now looking at those kind of early payment cash flow systems as a mechanism to manifest the budget. Any of those savings, they are strategically earmarking as their new cost center for technology adoption. So that's the groups that I've coached to help them understand that strategy, turning those savings into your fuel to de-risk technology adoption. They're the ones that have gone from, in the last 12 months, having few things under their belt to have scaled out new emerging AI solutions across their business. Yeah, so many levers to address the resource challenge around. We have experts in the market now that can be a part-time asset to your business without hitting your bottom line. And there are multiple levers businesses can be pulling today to pay for the technology and receive those results.
Well, it sounds like there's a win-win. There are win-win propositions out there, and I guess I would encourage any of our attendees to reach out to Shawn at ConstructIQ, just to learn more and get help in achieving that. Like, who wouldn't want to, be in a situation where you, first of all, adopt something that's going to help you, but also reduce the cost of doing that. Like, I mean, of course you would try and do that. I'm just wondering if we have any questions, Laura, if any have come into the group, or people do have something for Shawn or myself that you'd like to know a little more about. You can either answer it here or at another time. So do we have a Q&A session?
Yeah, the Q&A is
there
on.
it is. Yes.
We do encourage anybody to put their questions into the chat if you have any questions for Shawn. We will leave that open for a few minutes.
I guess while we're waiting for a question or two, I often think of this notion of, you mentioned it, we've been building things for thousands of years and doing quite well, thank you. There's some amazing edifices that have been, constructed. Whether the process was right and whether it was safe, you could argue no. But that whole idea of change and, it's going well already. You think of Clayton Christensen's thesis, the innovator's dilemma, that you disrupt yourself, right? If you do something innovative. And I think of BIM as a new way of working. It is a different way of designing a building and thinking about a building. And there's lots of people that are adopting it and moving that whole capability forward. Do you want to talk a little bit about the change part? Because I'm sure you've heard it too. Like, oh, we don't need that, that we're doing just fine, thank you.
Yeah, and the change, man, the change side is, and the word disruption is interesting, is there is, when we look at what we've been trying to implement over the last 20 years, a lot of it has been extremely disruptive, not just on a beneficial standpoint, but when I talked about the 3/4 of industry having brought some type of technology in, within that 3/4, about half of them are stuck in this mode of trial and error. And that is actually, when we talk about change, that is when we say the word disruptive, that is actually where I see this true, disruption in the negative context, where these technologies, conceptually, if you have the right ingredients of budget and resources and culture, you have the people and processes to support it. These technologies should have a positive disruption or positive enhancement to your people or processes or business.
Right.
But when most of us are constantly stuck in that never-ending loop of trial and error, that is a negative disruption to our business and to our people. And when we look at the change side of things, especially today, one of the biggest barriers preventing change in businesses today, even the ones that have adopted technology, it's the fact that they are fundamentally fatigued with this trial and error.
Right.
Regardless if you bring them this magic thing that will turn their business around, no, they don't. They're highly hesitant. They've been burned before. Many of them, they point to the technology as the cause of their pain. But when we say, hey, do you have the budget or resources, time or culture? That's usually the business scope.
So here's we've got a question that sort of continues that thing about change. This is from Aaron. Hi, Aaron. He says, Shawn, are you seeing a difference in adoption around technologies that digitize a paper process, same job with digital tools, versus digitalize a process, which is changing the way we work? For example, BIM changes the way we work. Is there, are some like the paper side going digital, snail mail versus email? Well, it happened like that, right? It made things quicker and better. Like, are there examples that you could talk to in that regard?
Yeah, and I'll see if I can snap something together real quick. There is a where is this one? I just had it on here, great one. So going from paper to digital, that's a point of change. But yeah, here, let me put this on. I'm just gonna.
Well, I think of some of the things we do with the planning and the trailer, using paper sticky notes and making them digital is an example. If you're already practicing a certain way with paper, it's pretty easy to see the benefits, I'll call it, or the value of going digital.
So it's interesting if you strictly just went from your paper to digital input, you would immediately think there is value to the stakeholder to do that.
Right.
Often not, because you're literally, just because you digitize that paper process or that piece of paper, you're still having to do a manual task, whether that is writing that down on the piece of paper or typing it into your digital format. That's a zero-sum gain to that stakeholder. The information that is being captured obviously has there's a lot more opportunity in that information can be utilized and support other people's business, decision making. So there is
Right.
the value that comes out of that from the individual, especially the field operator. That first step of change from paper to a digitized format in their purview, there is a zero gain in value. But where we're seeing a process adjustment, especially around today, what industry you're likely going to be seeing within the next 5 years is how that information is being brought into your platforms. The interface is changing. That manual input of information is now happening via text, voice. That's being put in and provided to different stakeholders in different ways, shapes, or forms as they need it. Getting people the information they need. So when we look at going from that paper to digital, that step change really did not benefit most of the individual stakeholders. They are now able to make that step change without, by having less administrative time, putting that information into the systems. And the multiple stakeholders are able to get information they need to do their jobs without having to search. So that's kind of a fundamental shift in the process of which that technology is being utilized today. I know Nyali, this is just kind of coincidence, but on this presentation, we were talking about even what Nyali is doing around, when we take that paper-based process to digitize, that digitization in itself isn't the highest form of value. It does have some collaborative benefits to it, but it's the fundamental change in the process we're seeing the significant benefits. So that where you've adjusted the process, you've streamlined processes, the process has enhanced your day-to-day job function of that person and the business. That's where we're seeing some changes, some big benefits. So I hope I answered a little bit of the question. Thanks for that question. But yeah, that first step of going paper to digital, if you're going right from paper, you can today go right from paper to be going more of an integrated format of information, and bypass these intermediate lower value digitized states of change. So I think I talked to Nyali a lot about this too, where especially in the lean community, where that is a highly last planner LPS, like that's a process. And the ones that are first learning it, a lot of people say, well, start with the sticky notes and then go digital. Well, I go, well, that's a two-step change. So if they're not even doing it, start with the digital, because it's just process. So the more of those steps that you take, even though you think that it's helping them crawl, walk, run, every instance of change is a change instance, and that's a hurdle. So if you're going from that zero state manual process to something of a digital process, I would say you just go right from the manual to your more complete state. That's, you can eliminate many change processes, and I'm sure Nyali is going, yeah, go right to digital.
Well,
But it is true.
That's an interesting perspective for sure. Laura, how are we with time here?
We're coming up to the end of our session here, but if anybody has any questions for Shawn, Shawn, maybe if you want to put your contact details just in the chat here. I'll also follow up with everybody after today's webinar as well if you've got any additional questions for Shawn. Again, we highly encourage you to check out his website and learn more about some of the initiatives he's taking on, especially here in Western Canada. For any of the Canadians on the call, Shawn has been getting some awesome initiatives off the ground with the new Prairie PropTech Association. So definitely check out some of the work that he's been up to.
Yeah, things are moving pretty fast, especially with the advent of AI agents, and we'll probably address that topic in future webinars. But Shawn, I think you started to introduce that idea, and I think you've probably seen an incredible shift there too. should we be afraid? How do we embrace? How do we like, do you have any great examples of somebody, applying AI? And like I say, it's a bigger topic than 2 minutes will justify, but what are you seeing out there in terms of movement in, the technology?
Yeah, don't be afraid of AI. In the right applications, it has been one of the most most significant area of value businesses are seen immediately. Most of us, 40% industry are already exploring it. A lot of it around, just writing emails and text more efficiently, but ones that are applying applications of AI to automate and integrate those kind of those administrative tasks in the business, in the field operators' lives. When they are the ones that are bringing in those very, very very simple little automation tasks, AI-driven report productions, things like that, and then integrate all those together, provide information to the people they need. Very simple. The ones that are freeing up their time by reducing their administrative tasks, purposefully, process-wise, directing that time to mentoring, supervising, coordinating, planning, avoiding rework. This is an example of a group that went through this process last fall, and within weeks they discovered significant value. Their field stakeholders were proactively discovering issues in the field, preventing instances of delays, rework. Just a nudge of addressing rework and delays is the area where groups are finding the biggest benefits. And this is something not to be afraid of. It's things that people can bring these into their business immediately without having crazy robust data sets, but it's highly tangible, resonates directly with the field stakeholders. They welcome these things that free up their time. So this is just an example. And these aren't hypothetical pie in the sky, value propositions. These are real world results that businesses, small and mid-sized businesses, are seeing. So it's quite interesting. Again, I encourage the group here, reach out, have a conversation on these things, especially even on your current technology initiatives or some of your client challenges you're having. Let's have a conversation on those cost relief measures that you can be bringing into your business. We're seeing a lot of worries around the impact of tariffs and things like that on construction costs, construction businesses. So whether you're a technology provider, a contractor, or an engineering firm, or otherwise, let's have a chat about those cost recovery, cost saving mechanisms. Because the worst thing that you can do right now is start slashing and burning your technology budgets. Because in this, I'm a believer that if with the right technologies, you cannot survive in this day and age. So the typical slash and burn of technology budgets, that will be the most significant harm to your business at this point in time, and that it'll cripple the momentum you've had. You'll have to restart that engine all over again. So the conversations that we can have, not just on the technology insight side, but the measures that you can be taking to kind of de-risk that process, recover some of those costs involved with that.
All right. Well,
All right.
thanks for all that. We value time and change. I think there's some nice talking points from today, Shawn. So again, appreciate your time. And I don't know, Laura, if you wanted to make any closing remarks.
No, I think that's everything. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. I will have the recording available shortly and hope to see you on our next webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for having me on.
You bet. We'll see you.